Alright, our Java Basics Review, page 5, and here we go. Question 22. Write a program that starts with a positive integer we'll call n, and then prints the sum of all numbers from 1 to n, except those divisible by 3, using a for loop. I'm going to start out, as I've done with everything else, with a main method. So public static void main. Bring in my array of strings called args. It's like I'm a pirate. Arg. Then I'm going to set up my variables. So I've got an integer called n. So int n, and it has a value. It doesn't tell me what to give it its value, so I'm just going to make it 7. I can make it whatever I wanted. Then I need, because I'm summing, I'll need an additive. So int sum equals, and it starts at 0 because I haven't added anything. I can go through here now and do my for loop. So I make my ugly for loop. Int I equals 0. I is less than 10. I plus plus. So I made my loop. Now I go back and clean my loop up. So I want it to go from 1 to n. So I don't necessarily want to come 0. I want to go from 1 to n. I want to include n, so it needs to be less than or equal to, equal to n. Now I've got a good loop in there, but I don't want it to pick up things used by 3. So I need to ensure it's not divisible by 3. So I'm going to do an if statement, and I do my condition. My condition is a not condition, not divisible by 3. To find if something's divisible by, I use the modulus. If I divide it by that number, the remainder is 0 if it's divisible by that number. So my modulus is. So here's my case. If I modulus 3 does not equal 0. So if it equals 0, if it is divisible, I don't want it in there. So does not equal 0. Then I can start doing some stuff. At that point, I want to go ahead and add it to my sum. So sum plus equals I. Close out my if statement. Close out my for loop. Now I'm going to print it. And I'm just going to print the sum. I'm not getting creative here. And then close my main loop. This will print everything except, it'll print the sum with everything except those numbers divisible by 3. Question 23. Write a program that starts with a positive integer n and then prints the sum of all the numbers from 1 to n unless the sum exceeds 40. So basically, the minute the sum exceeds 40, I want to stop. So same thing I did before. I create my main method. Hopefully you're doing this and it's starting to get repetitive. It gets repetitive, then you forget, and then you get it right. I'm going to start with a positive integer, and this one is n again. And I'm going to make it equal to whatever I want. I'm going to call it 9. Then I need my adding variable, my summing variable. So int sum equals, and it starts out, I haven't done anything to it, it starts out at 0. Then I'm going to use my for loop. I'm going to be cycling through from 1 to n. So I'm going to make my ugly for loop. So I've made a general purpose for loop right now that'll work. But I got to clean it up. So I want to go from 1 to n. We did this before. So I'm going to start at 1. You can actually start at 0. It just won't add anything to it. And I want to make sure it's less than or equal to whatever n is. Now, here's my problem in here. I don't want to keep going if the sum is greater than 40. I don't want it to exceed 40. So here's how I'm going to do that. I'm going to put an if statement in there. So if, and I'm looking for sum, if sum, since I don't want it to exceed 40, I don't want to ever get it to 40. So the way I'm going to do that is sum plus I. So if sum plus I, so it's adding it in advance before I do anything. If that is greater than 40, there's my check. If that's the case, what I want to do is break. Break is a fancy way to exit any kind of loop. Now close off that loop. Now, if that's not true, then I can go ahead and add up sum. Sum plus backwards. Plus equals I. Now, it'll go through all that, so I want to get out of my for loop. So I close off my for loop. I come out here, and now I'm going to print my sum. So system dot out dot println sum, and then I'll close my method. So the break got me out of that. It escaped me. There's another one we'll stick away from right now. It's called continue, which just goes back to the top. I could have used it in the last one as a way to make it not do it, but I chose not to. So break gets us out of the loop. And that's how to make that never get past 40. It'll get close to 40. The minute it's going to pop over, it'll stop and print it. So the closest number to 40 without going over. Question 24. Write a method that accepts two strings and prints a combination of both. This is one of the straightest, easiest methods I've got there. So now we're actually writing methods. It's about that method. I'm not making a main method. I'm writing a method. So here it is. I start as public. Almost never will I write private. Later on when we get to fancy classes, we'll start doing that. But for right now, it's all public. Public, static, I can't spell static, and we get to decide if it wants to have a return or not. This one's just going to print. There's no return, so it's void. If there was a return, I'd say what type, and I give it a method. I'm going to call it combo print. So combo print, it accepts two strings. So string word 1, comma, string, word 2. There's two strings. This one is not hard at all because I just want it to print a combination of both. I literally can do a system.outprint. I can print word 1, it's a combination, so it didn't ask for spaces, plus, let me go put a space there so it looks prettier, plus word 2. Super low tech, but I made a method. It has a signature. So the signature, we've got a name of combo print. We've got the two parameters it accepts. We've got the return type. Straight up. One more to go.